up, Taiwan? I'm Joyce Sin, coming to you from Taipei with the latest news. China sought to leverage existing social conflicts in Taiwan through disinformation ahead of its presidential elections. That's according to a report by Taipei-based think tank Double Think Lab. Rick Lauert reports.
The dust has settled on Taiwan's landmark presidential elections, but questions over how China, which claims Taiwan as its own, influenced the big vote still remain. In a new disinformation report, researchers here paint a picture of Beijing trying to persuade voters towards pro-China candidates and sow discord among the electorate.
I think the most concerning for us is that we also run the pre-election polling to see how those narratives being spread and how they be accepted by our voters. And we see that more and more the narrative is divided our society, and it is a polarization are increasing. And we also observe that more and more people are receiving those political related information from influencers, key opinion leaders instead of the traditional media.
The message from researchers here is that Chinese disinformation tactics had an impact and that they're only going to increase and evolve in the future. They say Taiwan needs to better equip itself to fight this cognitive warfare battle. Leon Lien and Rick Lauert in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
25 people are being investigated for spreading rumors about election fraud. Officials say videos spread widely online are based on misunderstandings about the vote counting process. It follows calls from Taiwan People's Party chair Ko Wen-je to improve the voting system. Ko finished third in the presidential race behind Hou You-yi of the Kuomintang and Lai Ching-te of the Democratic Progressive Party. North Korean state media says the country has tested an underwater nuclear weapon system. It's the third time the North has tested the nuclear-capable attack drone. The test took place in the East Sea, also known as the Sea of Japan. It was apparently in response to this week's joint drills by the US, Japan, and South Korea. North Korea's foreign minister has also just returned from a trip to Russia as the two countries build up their military ties. Japan has signed a contract with the US to buy up to 400 Tomahawk missiles. Tomahawk missiles are offensive weapons launched from warships to hit targets on land. They'll help Japan boost its counter-strike capabilities. The weapons deal is considered a major shift from Japan's long-standing policy of having a self-defense force instead of a military. But due to threats from China, Russia, and North Korea, defense officials are pushing for changes in Japan's military structure. The US says it could begin teaching Japan how to use the missiles in March. To learn more about why Japan is investing in Tomahawk missiles, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Riley Walters, a security analyst at the Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C.
This decision by Japan to buy up to 400 US-made Tomahawk missiles, is this a sign of what could be a future trend in the way that Japan's self-defense forces are postured?
The purchase of the 400 Tomahawk missiles from the United States, I think it does two things. First, it shows that there's definitely a change in sentiment within Tokyo. As their new national security strategy from a year ago said, the region is probably the most worrisome it's been since World War II. And so, it's no longer just, we used to call this the sort of the sword and shield, where it shows that Tokyo has really changed some of the sentiment in that it wants own capabilities that it could combine into its own forces. The second thing is it also shows sort of expedited sentiment in these concerns for these. The purchasing of the Tomahawks is really more of a filler in the meantime before Japan can start producing its own indigenous weapons, its own missile capabilities to a capacity that can meet its demands.
Now, this push to purchase these types of weapons, is this more of a United States kind of led push for Japan to acquire this sort of capability, or is this more of a sentiment within Japan to maybe adjust to the current security environment?
It's absolutely coming from Tokyo. Washington welcomes it. Washington welcomes when any country, especially those it's allied with, takes more of an initiative to boost up their own defense. But this is very much a Tokyo decision. The belligerence that we've seen out of Beijing for the last several years has really caught the eye of Tokyo. It's not just PLA planes and vessels flying around Taiwan. It's flying around and sailing around the islands of Japan as well, and so they're very worried about those developments. The sentiment in Japan is, as everyone should know, is a pacifist nation which renounces any act of war. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have self-defense capabilities. That's why its self-defense forces are called that. But it does go to show that the sentiment around this is that Japan isn't going to necessarily strike first, but that it will have the counter capabilities it needs if it were to come under attack by the PLA or North Korea or some other party in the region that threatens Japan.
This isn't the first purchase of Tomahawk missiles by a country in Asia. Australia last year was also looking to acquire the same sort of weapons. But this trend of maybe a more offensive capabilities, is this going to be something that we're going to be seeing in the Indo-Pacific region?
I think it's one element. The other thing that the Japanese released, their national security strategy, is their national defense strategy and build-up plan. And missiles is a big part of that. Missile defense is a big part of that. But other areas as well, such as new fighter program development or autonomous weaponry, it's very much leaning into the new asymmetric capability sides that, a country with like Japan, where they have diminishing population, which means diminishing force size, have to ultimately rely on. And so missiles is always an important part of that, but it's not the only one.
That was Riley Walters from the Hudson Institute speaking with our reporter Jaime Ocon. China and Togo have agreed to deepen ties. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is in Togo as part of a 4-nation tour of Africa that includes stops in Egypt, Tunisia, and Ivory Coast. Wang says Beijing will help Togo speed up its industrialization. China has been building partnerships in Africa for decades, but its relationship with the continent is undergoing a transformation. Eric Olander, editor-in-chief of the China Global South Project, says the new focus is politics, not economics.
Yeah, China's relationship with Africa is undergoing a profound change, and it's a change that's been underway for quite some time, really since 2016, when we saw the peak of lending take place in Africa. And since then, lending has really gone down quite a bit. FDI is down sharply from 11% of total FDI in the continent now to less than 3% of the total. It's fallen behind some of the other players like the US and some of the other European countries. Its trade with Africa, one of the points that everybody's always happy to tout, for the most part, is flat when you measure it against China's total global trade. In many respects, a lot of the commodities that China bought from Africa, oil, mineral, and timber, it now buys elsewhere on the Belt and Road. The China-Africa relationship today is much more in the realm of politics, and great power politics specifically, rather than economics, which has traditionally been the role that Africa's played with China up until, say, the past 4 or 5 years.
A moon lander has burned up in the Earth's atmosphere after malfunctioning. The US-made spacecraft re-entered the atmosphere above Australia. It was supposed to make the first soft lunar landing by the US in half a century. The lander faced some key setbacks after launching last week, springing a leak after only a few hours in space. The suicide of a Taipei police officer has drawn attention to the lack of mental health care for law enforcement. It's already the second suicide of a police officer this year. John Van Trieste looks at the roots of this mental health problem and why it's getting worse.
This is where a 30-year-old police officer took their life on Thursday. It was a shock. This was an officer known for hard work and friendly ties with the rest of the squad. The police force thinks this was a hidden mental health crisis that reached a breaking point. This is not an isolated case. It's already the second suicide of the year in the police force, putting Taiwan on track to overtake its yearly average of 5 police suicides. Taiwan's government watchdog says the problem of police suicides is getting worse, and the age of the officers taking their lives is getting younger.
警察有他的绩效压力，有他的排班的特性，他可能3班制，所以他很容易造成他的身心的健康上的一些风险在。在22件里面有6件都已经陷入到所谓的长期失眠的困扰。
Mental health is covered under Taiwan's national health insurance, but suicide prevention resources for the police force are underfunded.
一年能够投入在这种自杀防治的工作，它大概只有370万哈，这涵盖所有县市，包括警政署。当然，这个预算占它的整体警政署的预算来说，连1%都没有。
Officer Xiao Renhao knows well what this can lead to. A member of his police academy class is among those to have taken their lives in recent years. Xiao is now one of the directors of a group that pushes for officers' labor rights and surveys their mental health. An unusual workload last year brought the percentage of officers who said they'd considered suicide to 11%.
我们都会说，警察在工作之后，他会慢慢的跟社会脱节，就是因为他没有时间去做其他的事情。那另外一个部分就是说，警察会是一个需要比较常面对冲突的工作，会定说，就是你可能要开多少单，那你要抓什么特定的犯罪，你要查多少案件。我们都会说它是一个很不合理的制度的原因是，我们都会说台湾是治安很好的国家。
Xiao says those who seek help aren't as stigmatized as they used to be, but they can still face consequences that can make the situation worse if they're open about it.
那就是要求你不要拿枪，但是这样其实会有很大的影响，因为我们大多数的勤务都会需要配枪，它就会变成连值班都不能值班，因为值班是要配枪的，它就只能可能顾大门，或者是做一些简单的勤务，它就会变成这个单位内跟大家脱节的人，因为他的勤务跟大家完全不一样，它会是对于工作状态有影响，你就会觉得到底是他不想工作，他偷懒不想工作，还是因为生病，就会分不清楚。
Xiao says conditions are far better than they once were, but officers continue to die. And his group wants measures like the abolition of fine quotas to help ease the pressure of the job. The National Police Agency didn't respond to a request for comment on these issues or on how it plans to improve officers' access to mental health care. And while the Control Yuan wants more spending and more counseling capacity, concrete plans for the mental health of Taiwan's 70,000-strong police force aren't yet in sight. Dolphins Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
A green energy solution may not be so green after all. Conservationists say offshore wind farming may drive Taiwan's only endemic marine mammal to extinction. Tiffany Wong reports.
Taiwanese white dolphins. There are just about 50 left of Taiwan's only endemic marine mammals. And according to some ocean conservationists, there may soon be even fewer due to offshore wind farming. They say this green energy solution can actually cause noise pollution and encroach on dolphin habitats.
离岸风电加速开发的话，我们相信对于白海豚的保育是更不利，而且有可能会加速白海豚灭绝的过程。
Now, Taiwan's Ocean Conservation Administration is urging fishers to report any sightings of the critically endangered dolphins to help with their conservation efforts, and they can receive cash for doing so.
环境的监测啊，更加强，然后这些废弃物的清理，我们也可以提醒作业的渔民也小心，尽量避开这些范围。
Officials hope by incentivizing the fishers to help in these efforts, communities can reap the benefits of the wind farms without endangering the dolphins. Eason Penn and Tiffany Wong for TaiwanPlus.
U.S. basketball star DeMarcus Cousins has arrived in Taiwan, with crowds of fans greeting him at the airport. The four-time NBA All-Star is joining the Taiwan Beer Leopards of the T1 League. He will make his debut on Saturday against the TSG Ghost Hawks. Leopard CEO Johnny Chang says it's still uncertain how long Cousins will be with the team. Cousins' contract will be renewed monthly, depending on the chemistry with his teammates. This is not the first time the Leopards have signed a former NBA star. Dwight Howard spent the 2022 to 2023 season with the team. Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more of our stories. Finally today, go for a dip with these humpback whales in the waters off Antarctica. I'm Joyce Sin. Take care and see you next time.